Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to which looks like being one of our most popular webinars so far with Mr. Ted Horner. Keen to kick off on time, and thank you for those that have jumped on time as requested. My name is Dean. I'm the CEO of the Accommodation Association, and I'm sure you've been tuning into all of our webinars, including all the ones we did on JobKeeper, our advocacy updates, our sentiment surveys, even the Looking After Yourself webinar, which we did last week, the wellness, in that wellness sense, and making sure that you look after yourself as well as looking after your business, because we know for a lot of people on the call today, that is actually the most important thing. You are your business and your business is you. So making sure you're looking after yourself in that instance is absolutely critical. Today, Ted is going to give us a rundown, a very top-line rundown on some of the technological aspects you should be thinking about and using this break that is COVID to be having to think about what is the next layer of technology you should be putting in to your hotels, into your facilities, to ensure that you've got the product and the services that everybody's going to require coming forward and coming out of COVID-19. Now, I'm just going to run through a couple of slides before I do go through to Ted, and I'm hoping Jenny will be able to flick through those for us. And we just want to, first of all, have a huge shout out to our corporate partners of the association. Without them, we couldn't operate. Host Plus, American Express, with NCP, the sector's choice for all their printing needs, and all of our other partners that have come on board through the last 12 months. We know they're hurting, but they also know we as an industry are hurting. So we're really proud that we're able to have our partners on board today, and thank you for joining. Also, just remember they have a number of offers and opportunities for you as members to get discounts and access to exclusive deals. So make sure you check out aaoa.com.au, our website. I know most of you on the call know the website very well because we've had record traffic through COVID, particularly to our COVID hub. So make sure you check out that and make sure you register your interest for all the great offers that they have on there today. The other little shout out we'll give at the moment is that we know you have a number of staff currently stood down or looking to do some additional work, and we're really proud to have partnered with Olive Learning, who can provide very cost-effective training solutions for you and to make sure you're engaging with your staff. And it's for all types. We've got products and services for all of our members. As everyone would know, we are the most representative association in Australia for accommodation, including caravan parks, regional motor inns, to the 5-star luxury products that we have. And we're really proud to be able to represent you as well as what we have and provide these types of services. I'd also quickly just like to touch on a couple of things that have happened in the advocacy space, which is our engagement with government, particularly through COVID, and making sure that they're hearing the concerns of our industry. We were one of the first ones hit, and unfortunately it does appear as though we'll be one of the last ones out. And the National Board, as well as a couple of other key stakeholders, had a meeting with Minister Simon Birmingham on Monday to tell him firsthand of the devastation that we've experienced as an industry, and the fact that there isn't another industry in Australia that has been impacted at the same rate as what we have due to the government regulations. We acknowledged that there was a need for such regulations, but emphasised with him to continue to advocate for us that the need to reopen the economy is urgent, and where the health professionals say it is safe to do so, politicians should be doing everything in their power to reopen the economy. We're very happy to report that we've had a lot of success in getting refinements to JobKeeper for a lot of groups and organisations for us. We know we've had a lot of success looking at Cash Flow Boost 1 and 2, and now we're really turning our mind to recovery. And that's why Ted's presentation today is such a poignant one. We know that thinking of what future customers need and future customers wants, technology is going to be front and centre. We know Ted's been doing it, since 1989 is when you established your your company from what we can tell, and you've been leading the way ever since. So Ted, I'm going to throw over to you. I'm really looking forward to the presentation today. I know I'm going to learn a lot, and due to the fact that this is a sold-out webinar today, I know all the listeners and viewers are too. So Ted, over to you.
Thanks very much, Dean. And firstly, let me thank the Accommodation Association for inviting me to do a submission. Just a little bit of background and a couple of housekeeping points. Yes, I've been doing technology consulting for over 30 years. I also had qualifications in hotel management back in the 70s. For those who, if there's anyone there that's a graduate of Victoria University, or as it used to be called, FIT, in the mid-70s, I graduated. So one other thing from a housekeeping perspective, I will be talking about technology in our industry, but I will not be talking about particular vendors. And if you're going to ask me questions, and I'm happy to do that, I can't give you an opinion on one vendor versus another. I mean, if you wish to contact me post this webinar, I'll be happy to have a chat with you one-to-one, but I won't be passing comments on one vendor versus another, because I don't think that's fair in the context. So the first thing I'm going to say is the reality at the moment is, and I think I'm probably stating the obvious, is that post COVID-19 or COVID-19, our industry is not going to be the same. We have a number of issues in our industry, and we have to address those. And I believe technology will be an integral part of solving some of the issues moving forward. But before we start on that, I'd like to ask a lot of the people, and we've got a wide cross-section of members, both small country motels, large hotels, etc., and owners and asset managers. Have you, in the time COVID started, have you had a chance to spend a few minutes or some time looking at your current technology? And how old is the technology? For example, if you've got a property management system or a point of sale system or an old phone system, how old are those systems? And are you thinking moving forward that maybe it's time to change? Years ago, when you bought those systems, you bought them for CapEx. Most of the vendors in the marketplace today have now what we call software as a service. And most of the systems now are hosted in the cloud. So if you're looking to move to get next generation systems, there are certainly opportunities now to move to a fee per month basis. And some of the deals that are being done, as you are struggling in the industry, so are most of the vendors. And those vendors are willing to do deals. And if you haven't contacted your incumbent suppliers, I really do suggest you do so. There are deals at the moment where deferred payments are being made available. There are models where the fees that are being paid can be tied to your occupancy. And so I suggest, if you haven't done that, you should certainly do so, because those vendors are hurting just as much as you are. In most instances, a lot of the vendors have had to let staff go or stand them down, hopefully with bringing them back when the industry gets back on its feet. And the other thing, of course, is in the current climate, obviously costs are important. And yes, some of the support fees that you're paying, that you have paid in the past, certainly need to be reevaluated. Like, you know, if you've got internet in your hotel, what are you paying your current supplier for the pipe, as we call it? In the last 3 years, and some of these deals are 3 years old, there are serious reductions where you might have been paying a couple of $1,000 a month for 100 meg service or $1,500. You can now, there are now deals in the marketplace where you can get 1 gig pipe with unlimited data. That's the speed, the pipe, and the pipe for less than $1,000 on a 3-year deal. So if you have contracts that are near expiration, reach out to those ISPs, internet service providers, and see if you can say to them, you know, that, hey, there's a reduction. I know, for example, many of you may have Foxtel. Well, Foxtel's bleeding badly, and its biggest problem is its usage levels has fallen off because it hasn't got any live support. So I will talk down the stream about some alternatives that we need to look at. I'm not suggesting you know, but maybe there's an opportunity to go back to Foxtel and maybe reduce the number of channels you have and see if they will do a deal, because at the moment they're doing deals for residential customers. And even myself as a customer, I've been able to get a 25% discount by just ringing them up and threatening to cancel my subscription, and they're willing to talk because they're hurting big time in the marketplace. So I mentioned earlier about cloud technology, right? The reality now, most of the systems now are in the cloud. What does that mean? What does the cloud mean? Well, any of you, if you're using Microsoft 365 or any of those other products, those products sit in a data center in the cloud. So the reality now is most of the PMS vendors, property management system vendors, have cloud-based solutions. So what does that mean? What's the benefit for someone like you? It means that you don't necessarily have to have much hardware on the premise. You don't have to worry about backing up your computer systems, getting new versions, keeping control of all that. The vendor, and there are a number of vendors in the Australian marketplace, nearly every vendor in the property management space now has a cloud-based solution. And as a result of that, you could be paying, depending on who you're with, maybe anything from $10 to $12 US, $10 to $12 per room per month for the hosting services. But that fee includes support, hosting in the cloud, et cetera, et cetera. So certainly something to look at if you're thinking about moving off from your old vendor to a new one, because the next generation PMS systems do a lot more than the old ones do. So that's one of the things. The second thing as well is now we're seeing more and more emphasis on mobile. And one of the things I'd ask a lot of you is there are an awful lot of websites that are out there in the marketplace which were built for desktops and tablets. But is your website mobile ready? In other words, am I looking at a mobile website? Now, I'm a Qantas frequent flyer. They have a mobile app which captures most information, but it was engineered for a mobile phone. If you want people today, and more people are doing it, using the mobile phone to make a booking, is your website made easy? Like I look at today about, I call it the Uberization of our industry. And what do I mean by that? I mean that Uber has made it very, very simple to book a ride. The same as Uber Eats. It's the same as if you're a member of the Dan Murphy Club. I'm a member, and every Tuesday they sent me an email, and with 3 clicks, I can order a dozen bottles of wine, and on Tuesdays as a member, they provide free delivery. So in terms of a mobile site and a mobile booking platform, if you haven't, this is maybe a time for you to review that and make it as simple as possible to try and encourage people. Because what we really need to do in our industry is drive more and more people to make the bookings directly themselves. So you then are saved the OTA fees. And I'm not necessarily against OTAs, but at 15% plus, they're taking a big chunk of the business. And, and what fascinates me the most when I stay at properties, and I fly a lot all around the world, is when I do use OTAs myself, and I do sometimes, when I go to the hotel, nobody ever asks for information from me so that they can reach out to me next time. So instead of booking through an OTA, I can then book directly to a person's website. So there are some sessions coming down that the Accommodation Association is going to do more about driving business through that. So I'll leave that to another day. But the other thing as well is what we're now looking at, the big word in our industry now is contactless. The issue I have as a frequent traveller, and I'm one of being Qantas at 5%, in their 5% club for the last few years, is the most experience I have that's the most painful is checking in, checking out. In this day and age, why should I have to queue to fill out a form, to hand over a credit card? And as post-COVID is as we talk about, how do we improve the guest experience to avoid the front desk? Now, I know some people are saying, oh my God, we're a face-to-face industry and we really want that personal service. But I think you're going to find post-COVID that more and more people are going to want to use mobile key or a kiosk or some form of bypassing the front desk. Because if you look at the traditional process as it stands at the moment, there are 8 potential touch points before I physically get to my room. And those touch points, whether it be a key, a room key, a credit card, handing over my keys or getting a piece of paper with a little slip on it, telling me what my luggage is for the valet, all of those are potential areas where, COVID potential COVID usage or can be passed from point. Even to the point of now, when I get into a lift, if I'm pressing a lift to go to my floor, how do I know that that particular button for that particular floor, the person before me didn't have? So we'll get on to the sanitation and the technology associated with hygiene as we move along. So I really cannot stress enough about having a mobile website with simple and minimal number of keystrokes to make a booking at your particular property. And if you can make it simple and easy and reach out to those people, then you might find that more and more people will be willing to go directly to your website to do the book, make a booking rather than go through the traditional OTA channels. So I think as well, so mobile, have you looked at, for example, mobile check-in? More and more hotels now are looking at providing the mobile check-in. Like if I use an example, like because they're an old client of mine, and is Ridges at Sydney Airport, who have done very well recently getting quarantined. Well, when I did that hotel open, we were one of the first hotels to make sure that we provided a mobile overlay on top of their property management to allow people to check in to their hotel via the mobile. And you've got some of the big hotel chains now, like Hilton, for example, are really pushing mobile key. But through their loyalty app, you can actually then say, I want to use mobile key. And that is using my mobile phone, using what's called Bluetooth BLE, Bluetooth low energy technology, which sits in a card in the door lock, to basically use that as a vehicle to go to my room. And I don't necessarily, if I choose, do not then have to go to the front desk and go through that process of standing in a queue, getting a key card or handing over my credit card, because all that information has been already obtained. So if you can facilitate that whole process, which I call a painful process, the same with checking out as well. I mean, look at the weekends when people stay at hotels in Sydney. Everybody tries to stay until 11 o'clock or 12. Then you come down to the reception desk to check out, and there's a great long queue of people because everyone's pushing the limit to check out at midday or 11 o'clock. So if you have the capability to do that, or alternatively now offer the folio, if it's an expensive environment, that the folio can be just emailed to me. That's what I do now. I just say, look, here's my email address. When I check out, I don't need a physical copy. Just email me the folio and I'll put it into my expense claim form. So trying to make that whole process of checking in, checking out more streamlined, and more so now because people are going to be very conscious now of how many touch points there are in the scheme of things. So if you haven't looked at some of these, there's a lot of systems in the marketplace now, more and more. And I think, at the moment, the usage of mobile key around the world is only about 5%, which is pretty disappointing when you consider the technology's been around for 5 years. But I think you're going to find post-COVID that a lot of hotels are going to roll this technology out. I was on a webinar, listening to a webinar yesterday with Jerry Swartz, and he's talking about maybe the first hotel, the first Accor in the world, in his Sofitel Darling Harbour. He's rolling that technology out. And I think that once we start seeing high-profile hotels like that doing it, I think more and more are going to jump on board and embrace the technology, because it's not new technology. So I think you'll find that big hotel chains will really get behind it and push it. And that will be a vehicle for people. If they don't wish to go to a front desk, they can essentially bypass the front desk. And yes, someone said to me last week or a while back when I mentioned this, said, what happens if my mobile phone is dead? Well, if that's the case, then you go to the front desk and then you get your key. So I don't think, these days now, we're so dependent on our mobile phone for everything. I think the onus is on all of us to keep it charged up so that you shouldn't have too many situations, hopefully, that by the time you get to the hotel, your phone's dead and you can't use it, the Bluetooth technology in the mobile to open the door. So let me look at Wi-Fi. Look, I don't need to tell anyone these days how important Wi-Fi is, but it's fair to say now that Wi-Fi is more important than a comfy bed and a shower. Now, you might have made an investment in Wi-Fi, but how old is the Wi-Fi? How old are the access points? How old are the switches? Because what's happening now is, as we in this industry now, more and more people are coming to your hotel, and one of the things that COVID's really doing is Netflix has really, the subscription rates and viewing levels on Netflix in the last 2 months have gone through the roof. And at $10 a month, with the quality they have, more and more people are actually coming to your hotel and want to access Stan, Netflix, iView, etc. And so as a result of screen sharing, where you pull up the details on your phone or your tablet and then want to share it on your TV in your room, it requires more bandwidth. You cannot be advertising your hotel that you have this technology and then the person goes to do it and he sitting there like we sometimes do with looking at the little thing going around waiting for it to download. So we're now having more demand placed on internet. And the problem is more and more people are using their mobile phone. Whereas in the past with a tablet and laptops, the mobile signal, the Wi-Fi signal in that was stronger than that's in a phone. So these days now, for most of the hotels we're doing, we're looking at putting an access point in every single room. But you must remember that you need to look at that and refresh that technology. If you've got an old switch that you've had for a long time, the speed and performance of your internet hotel is directly proportional to the weakest link in the chain. So if your switches you'll need one of those, and your access points are old and don't have the throughput, then maybe that's the reason why, or the pipe you've got coming into the hotel is less than it should be, and there are now competitive rates in the marketplace. That's something you should be looking at and going back, and because what you don't want to have is have all these wonderful other things in your hotel and have someone go on TripAdvisor or any of the other services and start complaining about your Wi-Fi, because to me, it's now like Wi-Fi to me is like water, gas, and electricity, right? And I don't know if many are still charging for it, but I think at the end of the day, the model of charging is pretty well over, right? And I think it'll offend people today if you're still trying to get money. Now, I understand the dilemma for a lot of hotel owners and operators. We are placing more and more demands on Wi-Fi, but there's no way of recovering revenue. So the reality is maybe we've got to think about, the room rate maybe has a small component to cover the cost to upgrade your Wi-Fi, because people won't forget that if you have a bad Wi-Fi experience, and I know there are places in Australia with very poor NBN and stuff, and I sympathise with those in country areas where sadly the NBN is not as good as it should be and they're relying on other services. But I think you're going to see a change in the next 12 months where you're going to have a lot of satellites, local satellites, that you'll be able to sign up a subscription. I'm doing a consulting job in Fiji at the moment, and we're using a satellite service instead of, because it's an island and there's no cabling to the island. So, and because it's a high-end resort, they've invested heavily in the technology. So I think there are ways to look at alternative ways to get better Wi-Fi. So I mentioned earlier about Foxtel, and I said I didn't really want to attack vendors, but I'm finding a lot of my clients now saying the fixed cost of Foxtel, which is based on a fee per room, whether room's occupied or not, and based on the package you have, is starting to get high. So what we're seeing in the marketplace now is some hotels are not renewing their subscription with Foxtel. I won't mention the hotels, but they're alternatively putting in these screen sharing solutions, which are providing people with access to the Stans, the Netflixes, etc., etc. And we're seeing as a result, particularly at the moment with no live sport, their viewing levels are down considerably, and unless of course you want to spend all day looking at old games of football, whether it be AFL, NRL, or old games of Tiger Wood or whatever, even, So my sense is the time is now, you should be looking at, because to me, every GM I go and talk to now asks me about screen sharing. How can I allow my guests to watch what they want, when they arrive at my hotel? And particularly now we have stats that show that in those hotels where people were quarantined for 14 days, right, the viewing levels went through the roof, and they're not watching typically free to wear. They're watching using products, Staycast solution, which is one of the products in the marketplace, accessing Netflix and Stan and all sorts of interesting things, because people can watch that rather than typically watching free to wear. And sadly at the moment, one of the casualties in that is Foxtel viewing levels are down. And at the moment, if that's the case, then you may want to ask yourself, you know, do I still need Foxtel? And that's a conversation you have to have. Maybe you go back to Foxtel and see if you can come up with a smaller package of channels for a lower fee. So that's the thing I would like to say. Now, the last thing I want to talk to, because I want to allow some time for questions, and I hope there will be questions you wish to ask me, is about cleanliness and health. At the moment, as we know, there is no vaccine. And at the moment, according to the World Health Organization this morning, there may never be a vaccine. And we may have to live with this COVID-19 virus, just as we have with HIV. There is no vaccine for that, but there are medicines that can be taken that control it and allow you to live with it. So at the moment, I'm a baby boomer, I'm 66. Am I more cautious than millennials? Absolutely. So how are hotels going to convince me that they have a safe and healthy environment? Are we going to start seeing the arrival of next generation technology to provide things like, you know, ultraviolet? Can we put that pump into rooms via an air conditioning system, or the fan coil solutions are in hotels, some sort of technology that allows us to give a level of safety and security? If I get into a lift, how do I know that that lift is not going to be the person before is contaminated? So I think you're going to see, you know, a lot of time invested, and I think maybe in the next 12 months you might start seeing next new technology that comes to the fore that provides a level of comfort to guests who might be concerned about, you know, the health and safety and hygiene in your particular hotel. It's going to be difficult because we're a very contact environment. As I'm, you know, are you going to touch the phone in the guest room? So as a result of that, I think you're going to see some interesting technology. One of the things for those who know me, I've been banging on and writing articles for 2 years on voice technology or voice activated. I don't know how many of you have in your homes Amazon Alexa or Echo or a Google Assist or Mini Hub. I've stayed at hotels in America that have this technology. So instead of picking up the phone, you talk to Alexa and say, Alexa, please call reception. Alexa, I'd like 2 towels brought to my room, and it's connected to a service request software. Alexa, I'd like to order room service, and it's automatically connected to the point of sale system. So when I place my order, it can appear on the TV screen, and it also be connected to the point of sale. So it's printing in the kitchen as I raise my order and accept it. So I think voice technology is really going to be, because it addresses the need for contactless scenarios. So that's one thing. The other one I think you're going to see, and it's in early days, but I've been watching it for about 2 years now, is I think you're going to see the arrival of robots in the marketplace. Now, in the first iteration, we're seeing robots in America who are doing vacuum cleaning of rooms, corridors, public spaces, etc., because it's backbreaking work, and it's a lot of work that most people don't want to do. And these things are very intelligent devices, and they are really doing a fantastic job spring cleaning rooms, etc. Like you probably have seen the units that Harvey Norman are advertising, Roomba, the ones, these are industrialized and commercial versions. We're going to see now, I know Jerry's got one, a robot, you know, in his foyer of his hotel asking FAQ type questions and other things. I think you're going to see more of that. So I think you're going to look at, you know, ultraviolet technology. You're going to start seeing arrive. Kiosks, I think, are also going to come into it, because from a labor saving device, if you've got a 24/7 operation, do you want to have to pay for night orders to stand at the front desk to maybe check 1 or 2 people in from 11 to 7 or 9 o'clock? I think you're going to start seeing, even though kiosk technology has been around a long time, it's come a long way. They're not those big, bulky things you see at the airports. You can have little customized units embedded in a desk. And the best example I can give you is last year I was in Singapore, and I stayed at a hotel with 1,200 rooms, and they got rid of their front desk completely. It's the Fairmont Hotel in, Raffles, Fairmont Hotel in Singapore. They invested in a screen-based technology solution embedded, and all they have some attendants to help you. Citizen M, big fan of a chain of hotels in Europe coming to Australia in the next 12 months. They don't have any reception desks. You self-check-in. So I think you're going to see kiosks really, because there's really strong ROI in terms of labour savings. And I think one of the things we've seen as a result of COVID-19 is those hotels that have stayed open, a lot of people are doing more with less. A lot of people now are becoming more multi-skilled. And as a result of, instead of having to pay the labour cost to have that third shift or 1.5 shifts, maybe for people who've got reservations, you can go to a kiosk and check yourself in. Yes, there will be some issues about touching some keys, and we'll have to address that as well. But I think they will start, and I think you're going to start seeing, I know several hotel chains, without mentioning, to allow them to make their announcements, but I know one particular hotel is aggressively going to be rolling out kiosks in 2021 when the marketplace comes back, because they see the thing. So I see Dean has come back, and that's the kit for me to start answering some questions. So Dean, you want to...
Perfect, Ted. No, look, thank you for covering all of those areas in such detail. The one thing, being new to the industry, it's only been 12 months into this role, your ability to bring passion to the technology subject is just, I've never seen anybody do it. You're an absolute testament to the industry and looking at ways to do things differently. So thank you for that. Now, we had a couple of questions come through while you were speaking, and one of them related to the pipeline, as you called it, is what you were speaking about, getting the pipe bigger into your hotel so you can have more data running through your hotel as your customers' demands picked up. And the question related to how does that work with the NBN? And maybe if we could just spend a minute or two just going through explaining how the NBN works to a hotel, what type of hardware you need through the hotel to get that pipe bigger, and what that looks like in a practical sense.
So the first thing is about NBN is just the carriage to your hotel. So on top of that, like I have NBN at my house, I'm getting 43 at the moment down, because by the way, if anyone wants to want to know about their internet speed, if you go to your mobile phone and go into Google and type in speed test, then it will do. Telstra's got them, as all of others. You can actually see the speed, your upload and download speed. And it will do it automatically. So if you're worried about your speed of your internet, go to it. But NBN is just the base carrier. You then need to have what's called an ISP. It's called an Internet Service Provider. And they're Optus, Telstra, TPG, who have just merged with Vodafone. Then there's a whole heap of other, IiNet's another one. TPG. So all of these things, you go and do deals with them. Now, what's happened in the marketplace is that these agreements are up to 3 years old, and the people are still paying $1,500 plus for 100 meg pipe. Now, if you go back to those vendors and hassle them, or don't, and say, hey, I now know there are deals in the marketplace. I've just done a deal for a client, it's a 90-room property. We've put a 1 gig pipe in, and the client is paying $850 a month. So now the problem is, unless you are aware of that. So if you are, first of all, go do the speed test, because that will tell you what it is. The second thing is, then once you know what it is, go back to your supplier and say, I'm aware in the marketplace there's discounting going on, and start hassling your suppliers to get you a lower price, because there's been very much competitive pressure in the marketplace, which has driven the price down to a point where it is, and it will continue to come down as the players in the marketplace try and grab market share, because what we're seeing in the marketplace residentially is a very large churn factor. So go back. Now, the other thing as well is that also is, it's only one aspect of the determination of your speed of your internet. How old are your access points, right? Are they the next generation of what's called AC? Now, the earlier ones were A, B, and G, and N. They also control the throughput. And also, somewhere in your hotel, there will be a switch which controls and centralizes all that. They are the three components you need to look at if you're looking to upgrade. And if people want to contact me by email, and Dean, if you could at some point let everyone know, I'm more than happy to if people want to reach out to me to point you in the right direction and give you some names of people you can talk to, because at the end of the day, don't forget, the vendors you currently have, they're under competition too. So you could maybe go back to them if you're in the middle of a contract and say, look, you know what? I'd like a better deal than I'm getting now, and I'm aware there are deals out there. Can you come to the party and give me that? So I hope I've answered that question.
Absolutely. And you're right, there's so much competition currently out there in the marketplace for the provision of data, and it's never been cheaper. And I really think the provision of data for a generation of people that are tossing up whether to stay in an Airbnb versus a hotel, that's really part of their decision making. Making sure they can access the same things they can at home in the hotel room is actually part of that decision making as well as price. So that data is really critical.
And the other thing, there's one other component, and this probably applies more to the chains than the individual properties. In the past, there was a revenue stream. And as a result of that, the vendors who were providing that service had a support fee. And that support fee could be anything like 25 cents per room per day. The reality today is there are a number of hotel chains, and I won't mention who they are, who actually have dispensed with the support fees altogether and supporting it themselves. But now, if you still want service and support from the vendor, you're looking at 8, 10 or 12 cents. So if you're paying 25 cents per room per day to your incumbent, you're paying too much. Now, if you've got a 200 room hotel, pick a number, and you're on 25 cents and you can get down to 10, you're looking at about a saving of $30,000 over 3 years, because these contracts are 3 years. So I would also look at, because there's no revenue now, you've got to look at the cost side of things. And at the moment, I'm doing a lot of forensic audits for hotel owners on IT and service costs. And sadly, because there's not that level of detail, people are re-signing contracts not aware that there are more competitive rates in the marketplace. So I would suggest to everyone, make sure you've got your contracts out and you know when they expire, so you have a chance to go back to that man and say, you know what, I'm not going to re-sign with you unless you come to the party, or tell the vendor you're going out into the marketplace and getting competitive quotes. Because when I see so many hotels re-signing with their incumbent without necessarily going back and asking for a lower price. So I really cannot stress enough, if you're trying to control your cost side, have that conversation with whoever it is you have, whoever your vendors are. And that could be, it could be a point of sale vendor, it could be anyone. They've all got support fees of some form or the other.
Fantastic. Now, there was actually got 2 questions of the same variety. So I'm going to ask the question, but sort of throw something in there as well.
Yeah.
Currently, Apple has about 50% of market share in Australia. Android has the other 50% in terms of mobile applications. Just what they're asking is, are you able to provide some detail on sharing solutions? And so when you go to auction with something like an Android platform or an Apple platform or an Amazon platform, but is there a solution that covers all of those platforms, or is there a best product in the market?
Actually, it's interesting. I thought that in Southeast Asia, Android is the dominant platform, but I thought in Australia, Apple is, I may be wrong. I didn't think it was fair. I always thought it like 70-30. But yes, without endorsing a product, there is a solution in the marketplace that is hardware, it is operating system independent. So in the past, what some hotels would have done is gone and bought an Apple TV, the little box that sits next to the TV. Well, that's great if you're an Apple user, so you can connect to the TV, but if you're an Android user, no. So the solution in the marketplace that is out there, and if people want to contact me, I'll let them know, is it's operating. So it doesn't matter whether you've got one or the other, because it could be you have 2 guests in the hotel in an extended stay market where the wife may have an Android phone and the husband or partner or kids might have an Android. So you do need now to have a solution that is hardware, that is independent of whether it be one or the other. Amazon's a completely different thing because that's a voice thing. So that's not a screen sharing solution. That's different again. But yes, these solutions in the marketplace, and there's a few of them now, are independent of whether you've got an Android phone or an Apple phone.
So another question has come in talking about the average cost for a city hotel room for the annual CapEx replacement for technology is about $250. And I think that was in your experience. How should owners, balance that out between everything else? I mean, there's so many demands on owners to get dollars. There's so many pressures to keep prices down. We know the market's going to be suppressed for another 12, 18 months, so rates are going to be down. It's going to be harder to make a buck. How would you suggest you start prioritising some of these things? And is $250 per room for a CBD for tech, does that seem right to you? High, low?
Unfortunately, I'd love to say it's a case-by-case basis. I'll give you an example, right? I won't mention it in the hotel. I've just done budgets for a 90-room boutique hotel in Melbourne that hasn't even started construction yet. Now, the owner wants to have everything in the hotel. He wants to have a tablet in every room. We want to put an energy management system in the room. We are going to put in screen sharing. We're going to have that. We're going to put door locks, TVs, everything, right? And for that property, we're looking at a budget of, probably close to 6,000. This is a brand new property, right? You're looking at about 6,000. Now, at the end of the day, I've given him the wish list, and I suspect what will happen is the owner will start in conjunction, we'll sit down and we'll start prioritising those investments, and some of those items will fall off. But yes, at the end of the day, as well, the problem for independent properties is the big guys, Accor, Hilton, IHG, they have global pricing deals, which independent hotels cannot get access to. So rather than say, this is the budget, I think what needs to happen is each hotel needs to start prioritising things. I'm really big on Wi-Fi, right? And there are, because of it's an integral part of our things. I'm really big on energy management because power bills are just getting through the roof. When I talk about an energy management, I'm talking about sensor in the room that monitors whether I'm in the room or not. And when I'm not in the room, it turns everything back to a setback position or turns it off. The old-fashioned key in the slot's useless because people get two of them, leave one in the slot. So the air conditioning and the lighting is running full bore whether I'm in the room or not. So there are areas where, like revenue management, we haven't even talked about. I'll leave that because I think there's a session, but there's a real, so it's a matter now, particularly as I'm concerned to owners, it's not a matter of investing in technology for a use factor. What it is what's the ones that are going to drive, improve guest service, but where there's a real ROI, and asset managers look at technology more in terms of not what to do, what the guy down the road's doing, but more about what's going to add value, and there's an ROI. And the areas I'd mentioned, there are, because people will make decisions to leave your property if your Wi-Fi is not good. Or if you've advertised you screen share and no one's upgraded the internet pipe, then you've almost destroyed the very thing you tried to get there in the first place. Because people ain't going to sit in front of a TV and watch some download things. I mean, we're experiencing that at NBN at home when my wife and I are both trying to, with two different TVs, download stuff, and we'll have some clashes. So rather than say there's a price, typically, it's better to have a rolling amount and have, this year I'm going to do this component and allocate a budget to it. I mean, as opposed to a brand new property has to have everything. And I think the problem at the end of the day is there's still a lot of people who don't appreciate the value that technology brings, will spend the money on gold taps and soft refurbishing their bedrooms or, beautiful new lobby areas, And my attitude today is, as receptions move to become a lesser environment, I find more and more hotels should be spending more money in. We talk now about what's called GRMS, which is called Guest Room Management System. And what does that mean? That means the Wi-Fi in the room. Is there a tablet in the room? Is there, we're going to have automated blinds. We're going to have capacity tablet to turn the TV on and off, lights on and off. I mean, at the end of the day, how far do you want to go? Some hotels, see, I look at one particular client of mine, and sorry, I'll give him a plug, it's Sky Hotel Suites, right, owned by Ewan Sunito of the Crown Group. He said, look, nobody knows who Sky Hotel Suites are, so let's go crazy and spend heaps of money. What we found, won HM Award Technology of the Year last year, lots of people went to the hotel and saw the tablets and other things and wrote on trip of, wow, I really like this thing. So I see technology can be, in some instances, a competitive differentiator. So, you there?
I am, mate. Sorry about that. I just went on mute for a second, and I was trying my best to make sure we didn't interrupt you. Look, I'm just building on what you said there. I mean, I know when I travel, internet connection, internet speed is really important. I put it up there as the strength of the shower.
Yep.
So what I'm just sort of thinking is, as we sort of move into this era where I'm not the only traveller who thinks that's important. Like I need to be access my VPN for work. I want to be able to download and upload my photos to my family if I'm doing leisure. If there was one piece of tech that you believe would give the best return on investment for a hotelier today, without speaking about brand, maybe just an area where you go, if you spend $500 on this, you're going to get a doubling ROI on that investment. What's that one area you'd recommend a hotelier look at?
I'd probably say right now is that I'm really big on revenue management. Right, and I know you're doing a session with I think with Melissa in a couple of weeks, and I don't want to steal her thunder, but the reality is today is managing rates, the rates you put up on your OTAs, all that whole revenue management, distribution strategy, etc. I think is really important, and I know a lot of hotels still think that they can put their finger in the air and have the prevailing winds, so to speak. But I would suggest now that there are. There's always been a very, very strong ROI in the revenue. Now, the interesting thing is you've got to have a decent property management system, because the first thing these revenue management systems do is they study the history of your bookings and the rates over the preceding 3 to 6 months. So the revenue management system has to be integrated. It takes all that data and then provides you with input to make recommendations about pricing points. I think a lot of hotels, I know there's a lot of hotels that I don't need it, but I wonder that they're really missing out on, I don't know now, IHG's now doing, the other thing that's really coming out is dynamic room pricing, right? Where people are making decisions on the fly. I just think it's too difficult today. And don't forget, revenue management came from airlines who used to yield the price of seats. So it's a very precise science, and it's not something that can easily be done manually. Now, I know a lot of people say, you know what, I'm not going to buy one of those systems because I can do it manually. Well, I would suggest that that's not the case. Certainly, I still believe if your Wi-Fi is old and tired, it's almost like I look at opportunity cost. You can't afford to have an old Wi-Fi system when you're trying to get the leisure market. Or you've got now, because one of the things that's going to happen as a result of this now is as a result of COVID, more and more people are going to be able to do the leisure work thing together. And I think what we're going to see is, for the first time, because I'd love to be a shareholder in Zoom, because it's gone from like 10 million users to about 800 million users, right? But the reality now is we are now seeing more, just as I'm doing this to you today, more and more things are going to have virtual. And as a result of that virtual environment, so I'm the CEO of a company and some emergencies happened, right? I'm in a country motel in Bateman's Bay, for argument's sake, and I need to do a Zoom call because that's what everyone wants. The success or failure of that will be directly proportional to the quality of the internet at that moment in time. So I still can't stress. So the problem with that opportunity cost is if someone has to do that, because in the old days, remember, people say, oh, go to Cayman Island and all these resorts. Nobody cares about how good the internet is because we want a break. Try and tell that to kids when you're on a holiday, and each one of them's got their own device or 2 devices, and there's 5 people in a room. We're going to see now, particularly for staycation, this lovely term the Americans use, the service department where people stay for a long time. And then, maybe you're there for a week. And then on the weekend, the family joins you. So you could have 3 or 4 or 5 people all accessing the internet at the same time. So you can't afford not to have good internet because the opportunity cost of having it could be that you may lose that customer. And then he may go on to TripAdvisor's site and say, oh my God, don't go there. So revenue management. But the other thing that's really big now is looking at and I'm sorry to use this company because they're the leader in the marketplace, but have you got a relationship with SiteMinder? It's become the dominant. A little company in Australia that's now worth $1 billion is now essentially become the default standard for channel management. The ability to post a range of rates on OTAs quickly and easily through this particular, not very expensive. So distribution, and maybe that's another session for another day, your distribution strategy, who you're in bed with, you know, how do you drive, what are you doing to try and drive your guests to come next time and book through your site rather than continually to go through the OTA? You know, where are your sites? So distribution, revenue management, and internet, and I think screen sharing as well. They're the 4 key areas that are probably the most critical. For those PMS vendors, and I think there's a few on the list, they're probably going to give me a hard time later because I didn't put them in there. But you can't.
It's always the way.
Can't do it. You can't.
You can't please everybody, can you? It's impossible on these things.
Well,
look, one of the questions. I know you're not keen to talk about brands, but we've got a couple of questions that have come through where you've spoken about automated kiosks and automated check-in. People are asking, they want to engage with that, but they don't really know where to start. So are there some established brands, but without plugging, saying one's better than the other, are there a few things people could maybe start Googling, and what are some of the things they should be Googling as part of looking at what technology should be part of their business moving forward?
Yes. There's a company, excuse me if there are vendors on this call who might be offended that I'm mentioning a particular company, but 3 years ago, there's a little group that started in New Zealand. Anyone who's heard of the Juicy Rent-A-Car company in New Zealand, they started a hostel environment, and the first one opened at Christchurch Airport a couple of years ago called Juicy Snooze. Now, they've just entered into a 50% agreement with EVT, which is, the Ridges guys, and you're going to start seeing Juicy Snooze properties opening up in Australia in the next 12, 18 months in a joint partnership. So they were, from the get-go, they literally had no front desk at all. So they forged a relationship about 4 years ago with a company in New Zealand who was represented here in Australia by Asa Abloy, who are the Vencard guys, right? It's a company called Liverton Hospitality. They have a very, very good kiosk, and all I will say is they are in serious discussion with some major hotel chains at the moment in Australia, and I think you're going to see a very strong rollout of that technology. Now, there's another company in Europe called Ariane. I don't think they've got any sites here, but they're really expensive, right? So there's one vendor. I'm sure there's a couple other kiosk vendors, but there aren't a lot of players in the space because up until now, it hasn't really been something that's taken off. So if someone wants to go and Google Liverton Hospitality, they'll get some information.
Wonderful. Now, one of the questions here is, and I'm going to throw my own comment in with this as well, is that with the idea with screen share is that the guest brings their own Netflix, their own Foxtel, their own Stan. I mean, I know when I travel, I stream everything in my life. So being able to go to a hotel and have the same experience I have in my lounge room in a hotel room is what I'm looking for. I don't really want to engage with that platform. Is that what you're saying is the future as well?
Well, that's essentially what's driving the demand now. So all I do is, whether I've got Amazon, and for those who are cricket tragics like me, if you haven't seen the Test series on Amazon, do yourself a favour, sign up for a 30-day trial because you can see the whole series for nothing, right? Or then pay your $9.99 a month. So the reality is now is all I'm doing is I'll walk your way through it. I come to my hotel room. I have my mobile phone. I have my Netflix account on my mobile phone as an app. All I do is open up the app with a couple of keystrokes. I then, using the hotel's Wi-Fi, I then connect to the TV in the guest room. I then pull up that app, put my user code in because it's my personal account. And then all I've got to do, and then all I'm doing is streaming via my phone using the hotel's Wi-Fi and putting it up on the bigger screen. That's essentially the base principle of how this screen sharing works, right? And whether you've got a Stan account or, I'm a big ABC watcher, so I've been watching a lot of stuff with iView, right? So, and I mean, at the moment, I can tell you, because I've got some stats here, right? These are the top ones watching, and Netflix is about double anything else. So number 1 is Netflix, number 2 is YouTube, number 3 is Stan, number 4 is Spotify, and number 5 is Foxtel. And the difference between Foxtel usage and Netflix is on a factor of about probably 25 times more on Netflix than Foxtel, right? I don't want to be unkind. And I think Foxtel's hurting at the moment, apart from the fact that there's no live sport, which is one of their main drivers. And I do worry about Foxtel because they're carrying a lot of debt. Right? I have to wait to see what News Corporation is going to do. So that's the key. So in other words, these solutions are essentially a way to connect to the guest room TV, and you're using, that's why it's so important to have good Wi-Fi and a reasonable sized pipe, because if you don't, then you'll have a less than perfect experience, right? And then you don't want to be advertising you've got that capability. Now, as I said, there's that, when people want to contact you, I'll put you in touch with the vendor, but there's one dominant vendor in the marketplace, and they also published a whole heap of stats on what were people watching when they were in isolation in quarantine, right? And the figures, are similar. I mean, Netflix is that far out in front, it's not funny, right? And the reality now is whether we like it or not. Now, the problem for a hotel, there's no revenue opportunities here, right? All you've got to do is make sure that the infrastructure and the pipe that are in place to facilitate that process.
So, Ted, I might just jump in here because I think it's a really good question from someone, and I know we're coming right up to 3 p.m. And if you're okay, Ted, we might just have a couple more questions and run a little bit over. And Jenny, if that's not possible, feel free to jump on and correct me. But there's some really good questions here I think that we should cover, and I'll just give you a sort of where the questions are going. So the first question I think we should cover is there an average bandwidth that we should have available per room, so people can start thinking about what that looks like? And then we've had a couple of questions about security of Wi-Fi and security for the guest in connecting in that in-room experience and feeling safe and secure in that. And then if we're okay, what we will finish on after that is people have asked for a general overview if there was a local provider to have a look at for Wi-Fi's and check-in experiences. If you're comfortable in providing that, that's been a question that sort of weaves through. And what I might do is just I can see a few people are sort of jumping around a little bit. We will have a survey at the end of this webinar that will be sent out. Please complete that. Ted has will make himself available for more of these webinars, and the more of the content we get, more questions we get from the audience, the more of the deep dive Ted will be able to do and give everybody a little bit more detail on this. So please make sure you complete the survey. But Ted, just those 3 questions would be great if we can cover them off quickly.
What I should also say is, if you provide to everyone my email address, I have a bit of time on my hands at the moment because COVID-19 has affected my business. So right now, you get an opportunity to get some points in the right direction. So the answer to can you just ask quickly, just again, just ask that.
Yeah, so the first question is there an average bandwidth per room? So how big should each pipe be per room? I think that'll be useful because we've got a lot of smaller hotels and also a lot of larger hotels. How do you balance that out? The second question that we were looking at was guest security in that Wi-Fi environment. Like I know myself, I don't log on to Wi-Fi in a hotel. I use my own data unless I'm traveling, and then I'm using a VPN. And then the third one was there's a lot of questions around the check-in experience without keys and things like that, and Australian suppliers, how that works. And maybe we park that third question and we do a deep dive on that later on about what a keyless environment looks like. So I think there's lots of interest in that space. So first two, average bandwidth and security.
I would be looking at, depending on the size of the property, I wouldn't be looking at, if you're a small boutique property of 100 rooms, I wouldn't be looking at less than a minimum of a pipe of 100 meg. So, and the reality is for the screen sharing, keep in mind, you're looking at probably maybe 2 megs per room. But the issue you need to understand is that not everyone is accessing that at once. So you don't then take 90 multiplied by 2 and say, oh my God, I need a 180 meg pipe, right? Because there's only a percentage of people at any moment in time who are in the room doing that. So these days now, if you're below 100 rooms, I think 100 is fine, right? Because it goes, the way the increments go now is 100, 500 and a gig and beyond, right? So if you're looking at 200 rooms plus, I'd go straight to, if you're willing to pay, 800, 700, 800 a month for the 3 years, because you typically have to sign 3-year agreements. If you're willing to fund that sort of thing, then you won't have any issues, right? So the question is, and I can be more precise about that in terms of, but I'd be looking at, 2, 2.5, 3 max per room, but don't forget, it's not a straight hard question. You multiply the number of rooms by the 3, right? So because at any one time, you might only have 15% of people accessing that or downloading or streaming. Sometimes there might be more, but, more likely what we'd need to do is to get, I'm really big these days on Wi-Fi doing getting vendors to do what's called site surveys. We do heat maps and we actually work out where the access point should be. Whether do they need to be 1 per room or 1 every 2 rooms? The old days, we used to put them in the corridors and that was not enough, right? Now people have expectations. They're out by the swimming pool. They're even in the lift. They're walking down the corridor. There's an expectations that I stay permanently connected. So I'd love to be able to be more hard and fast, but 2.5. Now, the second question with regards to security is be careful who you get into bed with, right? Because there are vendors in this space who invested heavily in encryption to make sure. Now, look, at the end of the day, if some of the biggest hotel chains in the world, Starwood, Mandarin, we could go on, have been hacked, right? And the reality at the end of the day is that the people who are the hackers out of Eastern Europe are smarter than most. And there's a real battle at the moment between the virus vendors, trying to keep ahead. But things like, which a lot of people do, and I got hacked myself. I was in Vietnam last year and I was at the airport and I was doing some stuff and obviously someone managed to, right? But one of the things I'd be looking at doing is, if you're a Microsoft user or using Outlook, there is what they call it's called a 2-step authentication process. So if you access that, it sends you an email with a code and you then have to enter the code in to verify that you are who you are. So if there's an external person trying to hack you, they don't have access to your mobile phone because they send the code to the mobile phone. So it's called 2-way authentication. So, there are vendors and there are vendors. There's some backyard boys that I'd be a little nervous about. There's some mainstream vendors in the marketplace. There's 4 or 5 vendors that are in the space who are geared to their solutions with some level of security to make sure that, But I think the problem is you've only got to look at what people are doing at airports today. Millennials, for some reason, really don't care about security. So you see heaps of people, because all the airports is free. Well, they're free and they're free for a reason. And there is bugger all security. And, I was unfortunately, using my phone, because the other thing I do, I have an agreement with Telstra when I fly around the world. I get 4 gigs of data I can use anywhere around the world. So a lot of the times now I'm using my mobile phone and using cellular as opposed to, using the Wi-Fi. So
Ted, that's a nice segue. Just and we'll finish on this question if it's okay with you. I know when I get on a plane, how I interact with the airline is fundamentally different to how I interacted to it 10 years ago, because they've innovated their boarding passes, their check-in, and all those activities. If I look at a hotel, however, and this is sort of combining 3 or 4 of the same questions, my check-in experience is pretty identical to what it was probably 50 years ago. I go to the front counter and I do those things. So combining these questions and say, okay, well, why do we even need a check-in kiosk? Why can't people just check in on their phones? And if we get to that point, how do we navigate the legal complications of that, where we've before we've had a piece of paper and someone said, oh, it's me, I'm here, I've checked their ID. If they damage the room, I've got legal rights and I can go after them. How do we balance that out in an environment where it's a low-touch visitor environment? I mean, Airbnb seems to be doing it. They're growing, not anymore, which is a good thing for us. But how do we balance that out? In hotels, we're very traditional in our approach, and how do we change that?
Sadly, the one thing is that when it comes to adoption of technology, we're at the bottom of the queue. And we're, without being disrespectful, we're a cheapskate industry and we're looking for everyone else. Cloud-based technology has been around for years, but we're only embracing it now, right? The answer to your question is, hey, now as a Qantas guy, we get our boarding pass on our phone. I used to get annoyed with Qantas because I used to have the mobile app and they'd still give me a little chit of paper, walked on it. They've got rid of that now. I mentioned right at the early stage about the Uberization of our industry. Why is it that we've got so many steps to do, whether we do a reservation online or, why am I still signing some sort of signature? Like in Asia, one of the problems that's held back mobile is that in Asia and Dubai, you have to scan your passport. So there are some issues geographically around the world that impact on things. But the reality now is we have been slow as an industry to embrace the mobile world. And I think maybe finally COVID with the hygienic components and contactless is probably now going to drive us as an industry, right? And there will be early adopters of that, and then everyone else will be playing catch up. But I really think maybe we've reached a point in time where people's hygienic requirements, trying to eliminate the points of contact, will drive more and more people to do the mobile check-in, the keyless entry thing by the room with the phone, etc. Whereas previously, people were reluctant to do so. So I think at the end of the day, yes, signing bits of paper and all that stuff now. Well, the other thing is, most people who's come to look. The other thing is, who would have predicted? Now, when you go to the SCG now, they've got large signs up saying this is cashless. At the rate we're going, within the next couple of years, you'll be carrying cash in your bloody wallet. It'll be going mouldy. So the reality now, when you check into a hotel now, they've got your credit card details, right? So if you were to damage your room or do something, all they're going to do is hit your credit card, right? It's no different from now when you check out of a hotel and you fail to declare you use minibar, right? Next minute you know, the minibar charges appear on your bill after you've left. So I think there are some inherent protections, but it will take some time the biggest issue at the moment in our industry is, and it's a whole different kettle of fish, is mobile payment gateways and credit card gateways, with Chinese people coming with wanting to use Alipay and Google Pay and all that. Our banks are resisting that because their monopoly in that processing and merchandising is being lessened, and they're really making it difficult.
Absolutely. Ted, I think this is a fantastic place to leave it. I think positively due to the fact that we were oversubscribed to this webinar by more than double. We've had our high, we actually maxed out the number of people we're allowed to have on the webinar today.
Really?
Is a testament to hopefully the industry is looking at the next step and realising the power of technology. For those that, I don't think there'd be a single person in the industry that wouldn't be aware of Ted's Technology Conference, which takes place every year. It's in Sydney this year at the Sydney Sofitel Wentworth on the 13th of November, subject to COVID restrictions lifting and us being able to get back to a sense of normality. And I'm sure there'll be proper social safe distancing at the conference when we're functioning. But Ted, I cannot thank you enough. We really look forward to having you back, and I'm sure the members do too. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean. And the other thing I noticed is there's 4 chats and 12 questions. What I'll do is if you send me the questions that were not answered, email them to me. I will attempt to answer those questions and send them back to you so you can then post the answers to the people. I'm happy to do that if you wish, right?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Ted did offer to get in contact with everybody. So rather than throwing Ted's email around, if you email us, we'll forward it on to Ted. And I know Ted is super responsive on all the emails and everything. So thank you to everybody joining today. Thank you to Ted. Amazing webinar today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for your time also. Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. Bye-bye.